I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times. Welcome to the New York Times Close Up. What's wrong with the subways? We'll find out from a member of the New York Times family, a new member, investigative reporter Brian Rosenthal, on the Metro desk. Then we'll talk with the journalist Matt Taibbi, his latest book, I Can't Breathe, A Killing on Bay Street. It's reviewed in this Sunday's Times book review. My Times colleagues discuss the week's lead stories on the backstory, and I'll offer some additional views on Coda. But first, Times investigative reporter Brian Rosenthal. He's worked with Emma Fitzsimmons and Michael LaForgia on a team effort to look into what is wrong with the city's subway system. You can read that special report in the New York Times this weekend and, of course, at nytimes.com. Brian, is the problem overcrowding in the system, or is it something else?
Well, thanks for having me. It is overcrowding in some ways. I think what we found is going on is that the number of people riding the New York subway has doubled over the past 25 years, and yet the actual trains that are running has not increased, and the amount of maintenance to the system has not increased. And so they have a system that's being stressed more, and they're not providing the resources to continue to care for it at the level that it needs to be receiving. On the other hand, we also found that the MTA's case about how basically all the problems are due to overcrowding is a little overstated. We found some discrepancies in their own analysis of what they say are the problems that indicated that it really is more problems with the actual infrastructure and trains, tracks, and signals than just the fact that more people are riding the system, and so then as a result of that, the delays are up.
And of course, with the numbers slightly going down, it may be that the problems are driving some people away. What happened in the 1980s when Dick Ravitch was running the MTA? He got an infusion of money. Things started to get better for sure. Why has it gone downhill again?
Yeah, well, basically what happened is that in the 70s, the subway was in a very bad state of disrepair. And with Dick Ravitch and some other politicians and transit leaders, they really put an emphasis on investing in the system, making sure there was more money for state of good repair and for core maintenance. And then things started to improve. And then politicians and transit leaders kind of took the improvement for granted. And they took their eye off the ball, quite frankly, and reduced the funding, reduced the maintenance. And then even when the subway's performance started to slide back down to, if not as bad as it was in the 70s, you know, getting as close as we've gotten to there since that time, they have not put that money back. And so things have just gotten worse and worse. The
worst on-time performance of any major system in the world. That's not something we should be proud of. And also, we're spending 60% of the budget coming from fares, which is higher than a lot of other places. You've got some other statistics in the story in the Times that, you know, are startling. 17% of the budget going to pay off debt. And the average for subway workers with salary benefits and overtime, $170,000. That seems like a lot.
Yeah, and that's the average for overall subway workers. We also looked at just administrative subway workers and found that the average there, if you include salary, overtime, and benefits, is almost $300,000 a year, when the average in everywhere else in the country is about $120,000. So that's, I mean, obviously New York is more expensive, but it's not that more expensive. And the fact that the MTA is spending all that money on labor costs, in addition to the fact that they're spending all this money on debt service, and they are spending all this money on some other shenanigans that we found out about and reported on, that means that they have less to spend on that core maintenance that they really need to keep the system running.
Whose fault is all this?
I hesitate, and we hesitate to name somebody specifically, because there are a lot of people to blame, and it really is something that has happened over 25 years.
But you do point to Rudy Giuliani and George Pataki as two of the culprits.
Sure. Well, I think that certainly the cuts started, that period in which I was just mentioning, when they started to take for granted and started to reduce the cuts. That was under Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki. Governor Pataki specifically also engineered a debt refinancing in 2002 that was a deal that brought in short-term cash but really hamstrung the MTA in the long term, and the MTA is still paying for it today. So I think we do name those people as a couple of the people who are responsible. But you have to look more recently as well. The current governor has been in office for 7 years now, and there has not been a single law that has been passed that has increased the revenue going to the MTA, even though performance has been sliding. Mm-hmm. And in fact, while the governor has been in office, there have been repeated attempts by the state to divert money that was supposed to go to the MTA via tax revenue or via cost recovery payments for services that the state supposedly provided to the MTA, that have really sapped the budget in a not insignificant way. Not a huge amount of money, but really have taken away hundreds of millions of dollars that could have helped improve the system.
And suggest that it's not a priority for them. If you were in charge of the world, how much money does the MTA really need at this point to get everything back into shape?
It's a good question, and it's a question that is hotly debated. And I don't know that we solved that question or were able to get a good answer. I will tell you that there is a calculation that is done, I think, in business in general, about the assets you have, the value of the assets, and how much money, what percentage of the asset value you should be spending on maintenance. And what we've heard from the advocates and the experts is that if you follow that calculation, you should be spending something like at least $10 billion a year on the subway.
And what are they spending roughly?
About $5 billion. So significantly less than that.
And as we were saying before, excuse me, I'm stunned that there is no mass constituency for saying to the mayor and governor, hey guys, do something about it because it's the lifeblood of our city. And if it goes down, how's the rest of the city going to function? Thanks to Brian Rosenthal for joining us. You can read the special report online this weekend at nytimes.com and, of course, in the New York Times. When we return, the writer Matt Taibbi on the life and death of Eric Garner, the subject of his new book, I Can't Breathe, A Killing on Bay Street. A few years ago, unless you lived in the Stapleton section of Staten Island and bought loose cigarettes, you may never have heard of Eric Garner. But his death at the hands of the police sparked a national movement and escalating conversation. His life and its aftermath have been documented by the journalist Matt Taibbi. His latest book, I Can't Breathe, A Killing on Bay Street, just been published by the Spiegel and Grau imprint of Penguin Random House, received a rave review from Jamil Smith in this Sunday's New York Times book review. He writes, humanization never is confused with pity. Why did you write this book, Matt? What prompted you to go after this one case and draw all sorts of lessons from it?
My previous book was a little bit about the criminal justice system. I spent a lot of time writing about Wall Street and why certain people go to jail and others don't. I thought this case would be an interesting way to get into the whole issue of community policing, broken windows, and some other things. But then I went out into the street and started asking about Eric Garner, and he was such an interesting person that I ended up really writing more about him as a human being than really about a lot of those issues.
It sounds like you learned a lot in doing this book. You called it a painful and difficult book to write. What made it so painful?
Well, I mean, as a white reporter, there were a lot of things that I found out during the course of researching this book that I feel like I should have known and didn't know. I think, for a lot of people, things like the broken windows policies, the way that the police operate now, where they can take somebody and arrest them for something like obstructing government administration or obstructing pedestrian traffic, it's really identical in a lot of ways to the old vagrancy laws that were used in the wake of the Civil War and under Jim Crow. And I didn't know the history of that kind of policing, and I feel like I really should have, and it's important background to know for cases like this.
But it's interesting that you got to know George Kelling, who was one of the authors of the broken windows theory, and also that the reason the police stopped Eric Garner was because of complaints from local store owners that he was selling untaxed cigarettes. So what should the police do in a case like that?
Well, there's a little bit of a problem in this particular case because the law doesn't allow a whole lot for the police to do in this case. What Garner was doing, he was selling untaxed cigarettes. It wasn't legal, but it was barely a misdemeanor depending on how much he had in his pocket at the time. So the police really couldn't do a whole lot in order to prevent the activity. I will say that about the complaints in the neighborhood, that there were 2 Erics in that neighborhood who were selling untaxed cigarettes, and I think there's a pretty convincing case to be made, although I didn't make it in the book, that there was some confusion that might have led to a sort of mistaken identity situation on the day in question.
There have been very few sympathetic portraits painted of Eric Garner, the man. You do that to some extent in this book, although you say he may have created a lot of his own problems. What do you mean by that?
Eric Garner certainly was not without flaws. He had been a crack dealer in his youth. He got married extremely young. Feeling the economic pressure, he did what a lot of kids in his neighborhood did, and he resorted to dealing drugs. He was in and out of jail numerous times. There were charges for assault. But the thing that I heard over and over again on the street, and the thing that attracted to him as a person, was just that everybody liked him. They thought he had a good heart, that he was really devoted to his family, that he was out there doing this because he felt this overwhelming need to feed his kids, and that was why he was out there 7 days a week.
Was something like this, if not this particular incident, almost inevitable given the circumstances at play?
I think a lot of these incidents, I think that's the most important lesson to draw from a lot of these incidents, is that the high number of contacts between the police and the population, especially when you have this new statistics-based approach to crime that necessitates, it tells police to go out. We want you to go out and create a lot of contact with the population. We want you to stop people and question them and pat them down and ask them what they're doing and arrest them or ticket them for minor violations. When you create a lot of those contacts, inevitably a few of them are going to go sideways, and there are going to be some that end in tragedy, and I think that this is one of those instances.
Matt, I wouldn't want to be a cop who has to decide in a matter of seconds how to handle a situation like this, especially if you can question how well some of them have been trained. If you were in the grand jury considering this case, what would you have done?
Well, I probably would have voted to indict, depending on what the charge was, because as it was explained to me by a lot of lawyers, the simple case here was that the officer used a banned procedure. The commissioner himself described it as a chokehold. The police aren't allowed to use chokeholds, and somebody died as a result. So there's a case for a kind of, maybe it's criminally negligent homicide, something along those lines. But it's not cut and dried, murder. It's a difficult case, but it relies. I think that the tape speaks to itself. It was a completely unnecessary death. The man also, incidentally, as I learned when I was researching the book, was not even selling cigarettes that day. Mm-hmm. So that to me is an important part of the case as well. That yes, the police have an extraordinarily difficult job to make decisions in a split second, what to do, how to handle certain people. But in this particular case, there's very strong evidence that Eric Garner wasn't even doing anything wrong at the time, and therefore the whole thing should have been avoidable.
One of the, I guess, brighter sides of this, if there is anything to be said brighter, is his daughter Erica. Absolutely.
She came out of this and she became kind of a leader of a movement to galvanize people and shed light on the story and on larger issues of police brutality. And she was a really fascinating person. I think, without her cooperation, early on in the process, I talked to her and I sort of let her know that the portrait I was going to draw of her father may include some negative things. And she was surprisingly okay with that. She said, I wanted people to know who my father was, that he was just a man, and I think she was just a very impressive person, and she came across as and out of this she became a leader of sorts. Also
fascinating, of course, the power of video when you can actually see what's going on before you and make a better judgment. Thanks to Matt Taibbi for joining me. I Can't Breathe, The Killing on Bay Street, just been published by the Spiegel and Grau imprint of Penguin Random House, reviewed in this Sunday's Times Book Review. And when we return, my Times colleagues on the backstory. Welcome back. What kind of week has it been? One-word answer: absurd. Harassment, finger-pointing, careers in shambles, some politicians defiant. See Roy Moore as Exhibits A through Z. The new correction commissioner was correcting herself, and the mayor's wife, Shirlene McRae, indicated she might run for office herself. Joining me to discuss these stories and more are my Times colleagues: contributing writer Eleanor Randolph, Metro political correspondent Shane Goldmacher, and City Hall Bureau reporters J. David Goodman and William Newman. Hung juries in the Menendez case and the Larry Seabrook case. Does this mean on the basis of the Supreme Court decision you can't get convicted for corruption anymore?
Well, it sounds like juries are as divided as the rest of the country. It does mean that the way the judge advises a jury it's a little more complicated and a little more difficult for, I guess, juries to understand. But I think in both of these cases, the prosecutors are going to come back and retry.
And what about the cases involving Sheldon Silver, Dean Skelos, and Albany? How are they going to retry those cases to conform to the Supreme Court decision?
Well, they've said they're going to retry them, and we don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but they've promised that they're going to go back at these two former leaders from Albany.
Shane, speaking of divisions, you wrote a story the other day about the divisions in the state Senate. How are these people going to come together? And is there a Democratic majority, or isn't there?
There is enough Democrats to form a majority in the New York State Senate. There aren't enough Democrats siding together to form a majority. So there's this breakaway coalition of 8, the Independent Democratic Conference, and one other Democrat who's unaffiliated. Those have both sided with Republicans. And there's a lot of pressure on the governor to help bring them together. And a lot of folks say, he's the only one who's going to do it. He says these people all hate each other. It's not my fault. They definitely do all hate each other. And almost everyone thinks the governor has the ability to help bring them together. The question really for me is, does he want to, and when does he want to? Advocacy groups really want this to happen before the budget, so you get an all-Democratic New York legislature passing a more liberal budget, signing it into law next year. There's going to be likely some budget cuts, so they want Democrats to be deciding what gets cut. On the flip side, the governor's governed pretty effectively having a Republican Senate and Democratic Assembly. It might be in his interest to at least have this all together until the budget's done in March.
What would be different?
I was going to say, doesn't his power somewhat derive from having that split? And at the budget moment, where there's the 3 men in a room and he gets to be the Democrat that decides between the Republican and the other Democrat. If there's 2 Democrats against him, whereas he doesn't have that same ability to bring consensus into that
Well, there are
negotiation.
4 people in the room now, because
That's right.
IDC, the Independent Democrats, they have their representative, and the Senate Republican, and the Assembly Democrat, and then the governor, and it works in his favor.
You have a weak divided legislature.
It also gives him somebody to blame. In other words, if things can't get done, he can point to the divided legislature.
And he does that all the time with the taxes that the mayor wants to do. And
Speaking of people to blame, the mayor was on vacation. He had to defend 2 of his commissioners. Let's talk about the Housing Authority first, which seems really egregious. The Housing Authority faking lead inspection reports.
Well, it's a little more nuanced than that. So for about 4 years, they were falsely certifying that they had been doing lead inspections when they weren't, and they stopped doing them essentially because
that sounds pretty egregious.
So they stopped doing them because they had a process for going into the apartments to look for everything, and they checked for lead, and they were given the dispensation to not do that every year, but they didn't come up in the Bloomberg under Bloomberg with a way of sort of doing the lead inspections absent a total apartment inspection. And so that continued into de Blasio's administration. They didn't realize that that was happening. But what was egregious, in my mind, was not that they were certifying it when they didn't know it was not happening, but once they learned that it wasn't happening, and that happened sometime in 2015, but then the head of NYCHA realized, that the chairwoman realized in the middle of 16 that it wasn't happening, and yet she still certified that they were doing it at the end or in the fall of 16, and that's where you really have a question of whether she, sort of knowingly provided false information to the federal government, and that information is used to provide NYCHA with very necessary funding.
Also, people may get sick from lead paint.
That's true. I mean,
apart from that.
Yeah, I mean, the incidence of lead paint poisoning or elevated lead levels is lower in NYCHA than in other housing. Like the lead issue is not as much a NYCHA problem as it is a bad housing around the city.
If you can
issue.
trust the data still.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, right.
That's true. But certainly, it's a very problematic issue, and this is an issue that came out in a Department of Investigation report right after the election that wouldn't have certainly tilted the scales against the mayor, but would have been damaging in a group of voters that probably were supporting him.
Willie, tell us about the Correction Commissioner.
Well, as we discovered earlier this year, there was a big scandal at the Correction Department involving misuse of city cars, where the commissioner, at that time Joe Pont, and many other top officials at his department, including the woman who is now the commissioner, Cynthia Brand, used city cars for personal travel. Pont went to Maine numerous times. Cynthia Brand went shopping on Long Island, drove to the airport, that sort of thing, and you're not supposed to do that. So this week we found that both the Correction Department had done an internal disciplinary review of these people, and then the Conflict of Interest Board, which is independent, did its own review, and so several people were fined. What we discovered is that Cynthia Brand both misused her car, and then when she was fined by the Conflict of Interest Board, she was ordered to pay $6,000. She didn't have a bank in New York to get a cashier's check to make the payment, so she asked one of her subordinates to go to his bank and off of his account draw a cashier's check, which he reimbursed him for. Well, that's also a violation of city ethics rules, because you're not supposed to ask your subordinates to do favors for you. And it certainly wasn't that guy's job to run around to his bank to get his boss a check.
And it was the day she was appointed.
And it was also the day that she was named by Mayor de Blasio as the new commissioner.
Amazing.
So.
Shane, the governor, who is probably going to run for re-election next year, has the biggest war chest of any candidate in America. Is that true?
Any Democratic candidate in America, yeah. And we did a story this week looking at how he raised that money, and it's almost entirely from large donors.
And how big is it?
$25 million right now. Best guess it'll be above 30. He was just in California this week. $50,000.
He can just spend the interest on his campaign.
He earned $101,000 in interest in the first 6 months of this year. Compared to that to small contributors, he raised something like $30,000 over the last 3 years from donations below $200. That's almost nothing, virtually nothing. 99.9% of his money came from larger contributions.
Thanks to my Times colleagues, Eleanor Randolph, Shane Goldmacher, J. David Goodman, and William Newman for joining us, and I'll offer some additional thoughts on Coda. Evacuation Day. The very name suggests what New York's millionaires might do if Congress disallows the deductibility of state and local taxes from federal returns. Evacuate to Florida or another tax haven. Evacuation Day, the holiday, though, is November 25th. It commemorates the belated British departure from New York after 7 years of dismal occupation and fully 2 years after the British surrendered at Yorktown. New York, as the novelist Kevin Baker says, once more was part of America. But when George Washington got to Bowling Green that day, the British standard was still flying from a flagpole that had been mischievously greased by the departing troops. As legend has it, John Van Arsdale, a former American prisoner of war, deftly climbed the pole. He replaced the Union Jack with the Stars and Stripes. A departing British warship passing through the Narrows fired a spiteful parting shot, apparently the last round of the Revolutionary War. Evacuation Day was perpetuated for decades and celebrated exuberantly by the city's growing population of Irish immigrants. By the early 20th century, though, Thanksgiving had overtaken Evacuation Day as the premier autumnal rite. And in 1916, with city officials seeking to reconcile the waning Irish political ascendancy with growing sympathy toward Britain during World War I, Evacuation Day was celebrated with official mayoral sanction for the last time. Evacuation Day, Kevin Baker told me, is what results when bad names happen to perfectly good holidays. The Lower Manhattan Historical Association has tried stoically to revive the holiday. The group succeeded only recently in getting a portion of Bowling Green in Lower Manhattan named Evacuation Day Plaza. The association will celebrate there and at Federal Hall on Thanksgiving weekend. If you're celebrating that day or just shopping, it's worth recalling these words of an anonymous New Yorker who witnessed the original British evacuation in 1783. The troops just leaving us were as if equipped for show, and with their scarlet uniforms and burnished arms made a brilliant display, she wrote. The troops that marched in, on the contrary, were ill-clad and weather-beaten and made a forlorn appearance. But then they were our troops, and as I looked at them and thought upon all they had done for us, my heart and my eyes were full. We'll be back in 2 weeks. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sam Roberts.